Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. I'm James Messer, and this week in episode 34, we're going to work a lot with audio. Not just the ability to look at audio files and edit them, but perhaps we'd like to record audio files right from our computer. There is a big need to edit and maybe perform some special capabilities, some special effects with that edited information. We're also going to edit a multi-track audio file, and I'll show you how you could create your own podcast, for instance, with the pieces of software that we're going to look at this week. And if you already have a library of MP3 files, there may be a need to be able to change some of the metadata within your MP3 files. There's some great free tools that you can use to do that. We'll look at all of this and much more in this week's episode. Let's start with a piece of software that many people have heard of before called Audacity. It's been around for quite some time, but it's been a product and a technology that's really developed a lot over the years. Audacity you can find out at audacity.sourceforge.net, and as the name implies out on SourceForge, this is an open source piece of software. So you're able to take all of these things that people are doing around the world to help develop the software and use it on your computer. And I can say the capabilities of Audacity from where they've come years ago to where they are now are light years different. There have been a number of really great enhancements and capabilities added to Audacity, and I think you'll find some great functionality in there. Another thing I like about Audacity is it runs on many different operating systems. We're going to download and use one for Windows 7, my desktop here, but there's versions for almost any version of Windows out there. You can run this on Linux, you can run it on Mac OS X. The fact that it is open source is one that allows Audacity to be able to be ported to many different operating systems because there's many people helping to develop the product. There are download links. I'll click the download link right from the Audacity site. It even tells you here's the 1.2 and 1.3 series. Notice that it's saying the beta version, which is not a fully complete version of software, not ready to be released anyway, is the best version for Windows 7 and Windows Vista. So I'm going to choose the 1.3 to run today. If you don't feel comfortable running beta software, you could certainly run the 1.2 version, but as you'll find today as we go through this, it's very, very functional. It works extremely well. There's also legacy downloads. If you have older versions of Mac OS, there are other versions that you can download, you can use on your older systems as well. So even if you don't need the latest and greatest, you have an older computer, Audacity will work great on that one as well. When you first download and install Audacity and then you start it up, you'll get this help screen, how to get help. And this will pop up every time unless you say, don't show this again at startup. There's a quick help that should be installed on your local machine. So if you've never worked with a piece of audio software before, you're going to see a lot of things on the screen that are very different than perhaps working in a word processor or spreadsheet. And there'll be a number of terms and words that will be very different than what you're accustomed to seeing. So you may want to go through either the quick help or the manual. Also on the internet is a great wiki if you wanted to go through there and look for some tips and tricks, and a great set of forums. So if you wanted to ask a question, you would like to get an answer or see what other people are asking and see what answers they get, maybe search through what other people are doing, the forum is a great place to go as well. I'm going to click OK, and we're at this Audacity main screen. It's blank by default. We haven't started any projects yet. We haven't added any new tracks to this. And you can start to see there's things we can recognize on here. If you've worked with any audio equipment or a DVD player or anything that has these little buttons on it, you can see a play button, a stop, a pause, a record. Those are things we're accustomed to seeing. This next little block on the toolbar are editing buttons. There's a zoom, there's a time shift, there's some editing capabilities within this that allow us to change the data, the audio once we have it on here. There's online meters, so we can see output and input meters. This allows us to monitor the input to this and the output traffic as we send and receive traffic from this application. And then, of course, you can change the output and the input levels as we're hearing them, and some other functional capabilities here. And finally, we've got over here on the side how we can play back this information. You can speed it up and slow it down so that you don't have to listen in real time, which is really helpful if you're editing a very long piece of audio. You're just looking for a particular section of audio to listen to. Now, before we go into this, under the Edit pull-down menu, there is a Preferences option, and I'm going to show that to you because the first thing that comes up there are the devices or the audio input and output that we're going to use. You can see the host that's here is going to be MME or Windows Direct Sound. Generally, we can leave MME, but if you're having problems with your audio equipment, you may want to try different capabilities for the audio interface on here. There's a playback here that will go through my USB audio codec. I have other playback capabilities on my computer, but that's the one I would like to use. And recording, I have a recording option on that USB input onto my machine, and I'm going to say input in stereo because it does support a stereo input. If you're working with this and you don't hear anything, or when you're recording, nothing gets recorded, you may want to go back into these preferences and make sure the things that you've selected here match where your microphone is plugged in, match where your audio output is going, and make sure that you've got these set up exactly the way it should be. Let's say that I would just like to use Audacity to start recording some audio. There's a big record button at the top. There's really nothing more to set other than to hit the record button, and you'll notice some of the information coming across the screen. Now, I've got levels at the top. You'll notice that these levels are set kind of high. It's going all the way to the end here. So I know that that's not going to work for me to be able to change the level settings in here. I need to turn down the audio input or output that I have. So I'm going to turn this down just a little bit here. And you can see as I talk, the levels get a little bit lower and a little bit lower. So that's exactly what I would like to see, is something that looks a little bit more like this, where I'm not hitting the very peaks and valleys of this view. So at this point, I could even record information. Let's say that we're going to do a podcast. Maybe I'd like to record an introduction. So let's try this. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. And there, I've now recorded that. I'm going to stop this recording. And now we've got this section in here. That's exactly what we'd like to do. Let's click just in here, and I'm going to click the play button. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. Not bad. So that's exactly what I would like to save onto my settings. But I've got these other things on the end. In fact, if we play this part at the end, and there, I've now recorded that. And I don't want that as part of the introduction to my podcast. So I'm going to take this entire section and I'm going to highlight it just as you'd highlight anything else in Windows and hit the delete button. And that does exactly what we'd expect it to do. It trims that out. I can do the same thing with this other section, and I can even go all the way back. Notice I'm kind of scrolling now. That's not what I'd like to do. I'd like to zoom this a little bit differently. There is other capabilities in here to be able to change how this information is viewed. In fact, we can zoom in and out with some of this. The plus sign zooms in, and the right mouse click, as I click on these things, zooms out. So there's the entire section of what I was looking at. I'm going to go back to my selection tool, and now it's very easy for me to go all the way back to the beginning and hit the delete button. Now we have this tiny little snippet in here of exactly what we would like to see. And now it fits on the screen perfectly. I can see what I would like. Let's make sure that that sounds good. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. Not bad. Probably need to work a little bit on the clarity of input into this particular USB input I'm using, but I rarely use that for recording. But for what we're doing today, that sounds pretty good. So we'll go with that. Now I've got some nice capabilities here. I can start modifying this. There's a number of effects built into this, things where I can amplify and do bass boosts. And if I've got a very scratchy audio that's in here, you've got capabilities to remove clicks and to clean up this information. These were capabilities that you could find years ago in only the most powerful professional type of software. And now we can download it and instantly take advantage of some of these things. I can normalize the traffic. I can repair. I can reverse some of this information here. That would be pretty interesting. Not exactly what I was shooting for, but you get the idea of how those effects can be used to do different things. I'm going to go to the edit menu and undo that reversal there. Now I've got this audio in here. Maybe I'd like to mix some other information with it. This sounds good, me just talking, but it would be nice if I had some audio that I could use to maybe back up what's there. Well, fortunately, I have some stock audio. This is audio that you're accustomed to hearing at the beginning of the Mobile Classroom. Here it is, and you can see when I just dragged it and dropped it right into this, it opened up a new track. So I've got this audio track that I recorded up here and a much longer set of music tracks down here. And if I go to the beginning, I'm going to mute the audio track up here so that I can just hear what this other one has to sound like. a little bit different than what you're accustomed to hearing. And here's what you normally hear. And then I usually fade that off, and you're able to hear the rest of the podcast. And you can see it goes on for quite some time. Let's turn this down just a little bit. Normally this goes on for quite some time, and I'll only use a little snippet for the Mobile Classroom podcast, catchy piece of audio, but I don't want to use the whole thing. I just need a little introduction, and then I want to change the way this sounds at the top. So I'm going to do a few things. I like part of the beginning where I have that in there. You see, I've got other capabilities within this to be able to modify it and change it. I know that I'm going to fade most of this out though at the beginning, and I don't want my audio to really come in until the introduction is done. So I need to modify this and change some of the things around and how we're working with this. Let's start changing this mute here so that it's a little bit differently. And now I'd like to change where this information appears on my editor. I've turned on this multi-tool mode so that many different capabilities are available in editing at one time. One that's here allows me to move this over. Maybe we'll go about 5 seconds in, right about the time it starts this little piece, and then I can start talking right after that. That sounds pretty good. Let's see how that sounds. Let's hit my home button and go all the way back to the beginning, and we'll let this run through. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. Not bad. And at that point, I can choose to fade this information out. I've got a section here, and if you recall, I had an effect view here where I can just fade out that from there. And then once that's faded out, maybe I take everything else that's on this track and I just delete it completely. In fact, I could just highlight right here, move over just a bit, hit the end button, shift end, and hit delete. So now I've got a whole section here that I've modified just to edit that piece. Let's play it all the way through and see what happens. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. And now this audio will slowly fade out, and normally I'd be talking and telling you about this week's episode and what we were going to see and hear and do and learn about. And it fades completely out, and I can continue on with this. And at the end of the podcast, I do exactly the reverse. I take a snippet of that information, of that text, of the audio that I've got there, and we play it out and fade it out again. So that's how I and almost everybody edits their podcast, gets things going. And once you have this on the screen, now you're able to do a lot of things with it. Well, now I'm ready to use that. I'd like to take this information. It's on multiple tracks. This isn't something that I can use or send to anybody, but fortunately, we've got capabilities here that allow us to do a lot of different things. For instance, there's my export option, and I can export this in many different formats. And I mentioned earlier, if you've never worked with a lot of audio functionality before, a lot of these formats are going to be relatively new to you, but there are things that are very obvious in many places too. For instance, MP3 files. We've almost all heard of MP3s. That's a great way to take this audio and save it off, but MP3 files are compressed. Maybe we'd like to use something that's not compressed, like a Microsoft Wave file. That's something that is not compressed. So if we're going to use what we're doing in perhaps another project, we might not want to compress it out yet. We might want to save it as something that is the original uncompressed version of this, because MP3 is something we call lossy compression. It loses part of the data when we compress it down. Wave files are not compressed. They don't lose information. They're exactly the same as the original. We can save it and we can load it and we haven't lost a thing. So very often you'll see people who are working with audio save these really, really big files that are uncompressed just so they're able to use them later and have absolutely no degeneration of the sound. It sounds exactly the way we recorded it. And if you're using audio quite a bit, that's a great way to do it. Audacity is a great application. I could do an entire podcast just on some of the advanced capabilities of Audacity, and perhaps I'll do that. It's a great idea. But I wanted to show you a couple of other options for working with audio that might be available. What if you had a machine that wasn't yours, or you didn't have a copy of Audacity downloaded? You would like to maybe not install a version of software onto a machine. You'd rather just work in a browser and be able to edit audio. There's a great capability in a technology called Aviary. You can find it aviary.com that will allow you to do almost everything we were just doing in Audacity, but now do it in your browser screen without having to install anything. Let's see what that looks like. Aviary is not just a music tool or an audio editing tool. There are image editors here, screen capture capabilities. There are the ability to edit some of the things that you've captured, the pictures that you have, colors you can edit. A lot of really nice capabilities on the Aviary website. I would like to do this music creator, audio editor, something dealing with sound. And I was playing around with the audio editor earlier. It's something called Myna. I'm going to launch Myna for this new creation. And you can see it's going to load up some information here. I'm going to maximize the screen so we can see it all. It's requesting access to my camera and microphone. It uses Adobe Flash to do a lot of this. And here this is practically all a Flash-based application. So of course, you're going to need Adobe Flash installed on your machine to be able to take advantage of this. But to allow Flash to have access to that, it could then record the same audio in here the same way that I was doing before. For the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to absolutely allow that. And I've got different things I can do. Already you can see it's bringing up multiple tracks on here, which is exactly the type of things we would expect to have available to us. And there's different buttons. If I hit the record button, you can actually see a real-time view of how this is set up. I'm going to get my meter here set just right for the type of audio I have. I just want the yellow to come up very, very few times, and then I'll never get up into the red if at all possible. So I've got a real good number there. I can reduce echo or monitor the sound that's on here. I don't want to. Let's just record something and see what we get. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. We'll stop the recording. It's encoding that. And welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technologies. Let's import that into our project. That sounds really good with me. It's saving that right now. The name is this one right here. Let's call this podcast intro, and let's have it save that. Sounds good to me. So as it's saving this, we're going to now have this available to us. You can see it's a file that's right up here on the top. And I would like to be able to take advantage of that. You simply drag it and drop it right into Aviary. And there's the audio that we had before. Let's say we already had some files that we would like to pull into this and do some things with. We've also got the capability to import audio into this as well. To import that file, I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu. There is an Import Audio option, and it asks, where would you like to import? I'm going to choose the file that is that audio, that music that we put at the beginning of the podcast. Here's that file name. I'll click Next. It says, would you like to put a description in here for this? This is our podcast music. And I can tag this. I can put different tags. I can also share this with other people. If there's audio and you like to collaborate with other folks, you can do that as well. And what type of license would you like to put this in? You can put this into an all rights reserved, Creative Commons, or Creative Commons non-commercial. Mine happens to be this particular audio is something I have licensed, so other people are not able to use this. And you can even add other advanced information, which will help you later if you'd like to go back and search for different projects that you've done or look for different genres or instruments that you've used. A nice capability. We're just going to choose Upload. It's going to take a couple of minutes to upload this all the way up until 100% and add it into our imported files section. Once that completes, we get a question, would you like to upload another file? No, thanks. I'm good with that. And now we've got our two files here, and I've got another track down here. We can add this right into the mix. You can see the different options that are here. We could change where this starts. We can move this over a little bit. We'll put it right about here, and we'll play this through. Let's just hit the play button and see what we've got. Welcome to the Mobile Classroom, the weekly video podcast where we demonstrate today's most popular technology. And there we go. So now you can see this is very, very similar to the functionality we have in Audacity. It's right here online. I worked with it in a browser. The only thing I really needed was Flash enabled in my browser, and I'm able to take advantage of a lot of these things. In fact, it's very, very simple to use. I really like the user interface in this. Makes it very easy to get things going. Once I have my audio in here, I can save it online so that later on we can go to another computer somewhere and pull up the exact same project we were working on. And of course, I can do things like mix this down into a single file, something I can download and put on my hard drive and be able to use anywhere else I'd like to use it. If you're somebody who's worked a lot with MP3 files, then one of the things you may have seen is within each individual MP3 file are something called tags. Those tags define the artist, the album you're listening to. It'll define the number of the track that's on that particular album. There's a lot of different types of metadata that are stored within that MP3 file. And if you're playing it on an MP3 player, sometimes you'll notice things come across that makes no sense. It's not the right artist. The metadata within the MP3 file just simply isn't correct. And one of the things that you perhaps might like to do is edit the tags themselves, but you can't just open up a word processing document or click on the MP3 file to edit it. You need a very specific MP3 editing capability. Fortunately, there's a really nice one called MP3 tag, and this is something that is German. You can tell by the DE that's on here. The MP3 tag there's an English speaking or an English version of the web page, and it works perfectly well and has an English translation associated with it. So if you're listening to this podcast, at least one or the first or second language that you know is English. So let's step through that and I'll show you the way it works. If you go to the mp3tag.de website, Deutschland obviously shows you pretty much everything in German. Let's click this button at the top that says the English version of this document. That helps me quite a bit. Now you can see exactly the capabilities that are here. All you need to do, by the way, this is free, so all you need to do is download it and install it onto your computer, and now you'll be able to modify and change the tags that are on your system. Let's go through a library of MP3 files that I've set up for one of my training classes, and we'll see how to edit some of that information. I've started MP3 tag in a directory where I have a lot of different files that make up my A+ certification training course. And I've got many MP3 files in here as well. I go through each of these MP3 files. If I click on them, you can see the information on the left side that is tagged within that MP3. So this is the information that would pop up in the media player that we're using. Or if we have a mobile device, this is the information that pops up in our mobile device. And there's a couple of really important fields here. One for the title, so you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. Another one that might be here that shows information about the albums and other information that's available. There's memory slots. There's a memory slots one. The album is the same across all of these. In fact, if I move to the right here, you can see pretty much the same. The artist is the same. The album is the same. The title of this changes as we scroll down. You can see different titles on this view, and that's what you see in your media player when it pops up. If you wanted to change any of these, you would simply go to that particular view. You would change things like the track number or the genre or the album artist, the composer, the disc number. You can add in some piece of graphics there, so a graphic pops up whenever it's playing on media players that support that. And when you've got it edited, you can click the save button. One of the things that I will normally do is add new MP3 files to this. I'll simply select one and I can copy all of the information in this tag, move to another tag, and then paste that information in. And that makes it very easy for me to take the information in one MP3 and copy it to many others, and then maybe go back to each one individually to modify that. So if you have a big MP3 library and you're finding the information that you're seeing on your media player isn't exactly what you would expect to see, or maybe you're just seeing the file names, you're not seeing the artist, you're not seeing the name of the song that's playing, you're seeing some odd file name that's popping up, and you'd like it to be a little more explanatory and be a little more specific to what you're listening to, just go in and change your tags, put it back on your media player, and you'll find now you'll get a very different view when you're starting to play that music. If you're someone who's wanted to work a little bit with audio, you didn't know where to start, hopefully now you've got some ideas and some capabilities, some pieces of software that you can use to really get your audio from the very beginning to the very end working exactly the way you'd like. If you'd like to keep track of what we're doing here at the Mobile Classroom, you can go to our website at themobileclassroom.com. I have links there where you could join our Facebook page. You could also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/mobileclassroom. Of course, you can always send me an email at james@themobileclassroom.com. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next time on the Mobile Classroom.